executives, I think now more than ever in the crowded, noisy world we live in, have to fight to keep things really simple and clear and distill it down to the core of whatever it is. You could say, we solve this problem for people. That's it.
Well, Wes, thank you for being with us. I'm thrilled to have you on the show. And you and I have the benefit of being friends. So we get to have these conversations a lot of times just on a quick one-on-one. You are my default phone a friend when I have questions about sales and marketing and how the messaging needs to marry those two things. And so it's exciting to me to get to share your wisdom with our wider audience. So let's dive right in. I'd love to hear first thing. Tell us what energizes you the most when you wake up in the morning. That's part A. And then part B is what's the one problem in the world that you want to solve and spend your life trying to solve?
Yeah, right now, what energizes me the most in the morning is I'm working on a book. And so waking up every day, trying to find time to write that, work on that, and get that out in the world. And it's also, that's professionally. Personally, it's summertime. Kids are at home. We got a lot of things on the calendar, a lot of stuff doing. So they're keeping them busy, but also it's a lot of fun. So that's the first part. Second part, what's the one problem in the world I want to solve? I kind of have always hated questions like this because I feel like it changes every few years.
Yeah.
I mean, one problem that I love solving for people, and I've done it for several years, I want to keep doing it in bigger capacity, is I just want to help people understand how to eliminate confusion in their marketing and sales. I mean, it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
How much money companies spend, how much they lose, because they're simply confusing people. I look at stuff and go, man, I do it all the time. There's such a better way to say things to actually get the right people in the door, to help you get the right customers so that you can actually grow your company, whatever that looks like, whether you're a local business trying to do $1.5 million this year, whether you're a global brand pushing 900 million. I've worked with everybody on this. And it's always fun to me to see the light bulbs pop up in the room when we're working together. Because when we eliminate confusion, clarity shows up. And I'm convinced confusion is the number one enemy in business. So if we can eliminate that, everything gets so much easier.
I love that. And you and I together have worked on multiple proposals for big name brands, Estee Lauder, Nike, etc. You're my phone a friend, as I said. So when I'm trying to close a deal and I have a couple slides to write compelling words and to use those slides to compel somebody to say yes to $1 million deal, I call you because it matters what we put on those slides. And if you're just doing copy paste and trying to think that that's going to create emotion and persuasion in the heart of your audience, it's not. So I love the way that you position your work, which is you help brands find the right words so they make more money. Super clear. And I'd love to know what's the number one thing that you think every marketing leader needs to know about what the quote right words are for their brand.
It really comes down to the right words are the words that are going to draw the right people in, the people you want to serve with the problems that you solve, as it leads to the products you sell. And a lot of times the right words are really about, are we identifying a problem that we solve for the reader? Like when we worked on a couple of proposals for in your role over the years. And a lot of companies will rush to, here's our awards. Yes. Here's all that you've from places you've never heard of. So they sound made up. Here's our team. There's our background. Our logo is blue because the founder's grandmother used blue ink in her fountain pen, blah, blah, blah. That is irrelevant. The right words are the words that resonate with the reader in their context and the problems that they're facing and how you can solve those problems. Because our brains are wired to pay attention when there's tension. If we can figure out the problems that our audience is facing and speak to those, but then show them a path to resolution, those are the right words we use in our website, in our sales collateral, sales enablement tools, paid ads, email campaigns, email marketing automations, proposals, all the things that happen in marketing and sales. If we can lean into that and understand this is the context of the reader, here's the problem they're facing, here's how we solve it, we're going to wind up with the right words.
It's so clear and to the point. And I'm curious, when you wake up in the morning and your inbox is full of, spam, but marketing emails from so many different brands. What are the glaring gaps that you see when you're scrolling through that inbox every morning?
There's a bunch. Sometimes I open an email and I go, I genuinely don't know what this is. Somebody will say, this is from Michael. And I go, who's Michael? Like there's no company name. I have to click on the email address, go, I don't even know what this is. None of that stuff. Because people forget our inboxes are increasingly crowded. They're increasingly noisy. If you want to stand out, it's simple things like you might say Bethany, parentheses, door number 3. I might say Wes, My company's called Wayfinder. I might say Wes, parentheses, Wayfinder. At the bottom, I might put a little pitch statement that says, it describes what I do in 2 sentences so it can instantly be anchored in my mind. That's one thing. Another thing is, I see all the time companies have too many things to engage with on an email. I had a client one time was email marketing was a primary revenue stream, which it is for most companies. And it happens to a lot of people. And the funny thing was she wasn't making a ton of money in her business from email marketing. I said, hey, send me one of your emails. She forwarded me one. There were 27 different calls to action that literally went to 27 different places. Gosh. And one of them, only one, went to a thing where I could have given money to this company in exchange to buy a thing. I say, hey, here's a crazy thought. What if in our email marketing, we only promote things that you can make money off of? Do you think that'll work? I do. The next week, the only things you could click were things that related specifically to, here's the thing you need to do. Basically, you just spend money. And she made more money on that one email than she'd made the last 2 months combined in email marketing. That's one of the big things is, if we're going to identify a problem, we're going to communicate something in marketing email, something as simple as the right button to know what does the reader need to click, because we are scanning and skimming information at lightning speed these days. And we're looking at it going, does this identify a problem I have? And if so, how can this solve it? You answer those 2 questions in things like email marketing, and you're going to stand out in inboxes. Another thing that drives me crazy about email marketing, now this is my soapbox, one of them.
Go for it.
I think we overestimate how important subject line testing is.
Yeah.
We think, oh, well, should it have 14 syllables or 12? And what's the higher open rate? It doesn't matter. The number one thing we should be solving for in email marketing is, do people trust us as a sender? Now, I realize a lot of big companies like e-commerce and stuff, they're going to be just sending emails about specials and promotions and coupons and new products, etc. But if you're not necessarily in that space, you got to think about, do people trust us as a brand or as a sender? Are we sending valuable information? Are we showing up and showing that we can solve their problem? This is especially key with a lot of B2B service-based companies, right? Like if I'm HubSpot or Salesforce or even some of these other firms that are more in the service specialty space with services, I might be wanting to educate people. And I may want to get to a point where when people hear me or they see my name in their inbox and go, oh, I'm going to read that because it's really valuable. It's really useful information for my life or for my job.
And so much of your philosophy is shaped by the philosophy of StoryBrand. Mm-hmm. And the teaching is what I was going to say about just really this whole concept of a way to engage and to think about how to compel someone to take action. And I'd love to hear from you a 101 while some of our audience of marketing execs may not know about StoryBrand. Can you just give us a quick kind of elevator pitch on what it is and why you have adopted it in your own thinking, in your own approach?
A lot of people in marketing executives are familiar with storytelling. It's kind of become this sexy trend over the last few years in marketing. The reality is the reason story works, has always worked, and will always work is because our brains are wired for story. We pay attention when there is a story going on, following the rules of story more so than if it's not. You know, they say that the average person spends 30% of their waking time daydreaming unless they're in a story. If you're in a movie that's 2 hours long, if it's good and it follows the rules, like Top Gun Maverick, let's say, you're not going to check out in that movie at any point. You're going to be fully engaged the whole time. But you watch a movie, you're in a meeting, or you're at work, or even engaging in marketing that doesn't follow those rules, your brain is going to drift because our brains are wired to pay attention to that framework. And the StoryBrand framework is based off the best-selling book, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. It's sold over 1 million copies at this point. And it takes the 7 core elements of a great story and shows you how to put them together in a way to communicate anything. It becomes a great filter for communicating our marketing at the high level. I've worked with brands from small companies all the way to over billions. That how do we distill our whole company down to a few key sentences that tells the story of our customer? From that level all the way down to, let's use it to send a marketing email to our list this week. How do we use this for paid advertising? It becomes a great filter to take all the ideas and turn those into something that really engages people so that we go from noise to clarity to really reach our customers.
That's incredible. And you often talk about the intersection of sales and marketing. And as a sales leader for marketing agencies, I often say that I only care about marketing to the extent that it translates into actual new leads in your business, as I should, of course. And as every marketing leader does as well, I should say. But no offense to all of the marketing leaders in the room for saying that. But these two functions are often completely siloed, honestly, and especially the larger organizations and the bigger orgs that you get, the more siloed that they are. So when you come in to work with a brand, how do you help break down some of those silos and help both teams use words to more effectively, ultimately, drive the bottom line of revenue growth?
Yeah, to go back to your earlier to question before about why I've adopted Story Brand, I realized a while back I'm not necessarily a marketer. I'm really a sales guy hiding under sales cloak saying I'm a marketer.
Okay.
Because one of the things I love about Story Brand and kind of the approach we take a lot of times is I don't just want to help you improve your marketing. That's a symptom. The goal is how do we address marketing, messaging, positioning, all those things so that we attract more leads who become customers, who spend more money, and you grow, right? Mm-hmm. It's about figuring out the story of the customer that you want to reach, talking about it, showing how you solve their problems, and demonstrating a path forward. So ultimately, Story Brand is as much as it's a great hybrid of sales and marketing because it wants us to lead people to taking an action that's going to lead to a sale. And so I have always come in with that mindset. So when I'm working with companies, I'm thinking, what do we need to say and do to attract more of the people who are most likely to spend money on whatever we're trying to spend money on? Mm-hmm. One of the ways I do it is I often start by working with a team on site at their place, so they can come here to Atlanta. We'll spend a day together. And I love having somebody from sales in the room. I think it's so ridiculous when companies go spend crazy amounts of money on like customer research when they have a sales team. When they have a team that is frontline having conversations every day. I've been in rooms where marketers will have all this random data about their audience. I look at the sales guy and go, hey, can you name a customer that matches that data? And they'll go, no. Okay, tell me about the last 3 sales you made. And they'll tell me that. And I go, does that represent this company thinks you need to sell more to? Yeah. So why aren't we saying that in marketing, right? Because marketing is really just sales at scale. We're going from one to one to many. And so if we know what works in sales and those one-to-one conversations, the challenges they're facing, their process, who that person is, what they're dealing with, et cetera, we can now take that language and then use it in our marketing. I always say that your website should be part of the sales team, not the marketing team, because your website is educating like a great sales rep does. It's attracting people like a great sales rep does. And it's often leading them to take a next step, which is those are 3 things that great sales reps should be doing. And that's what your website should do. So we want to figure out how do we take what the sales teams know and infuse that into the marketing language so that we can say, now let's broadcast that to more people and get more people in the funnel or in our process pipeline, whatever it is, so that they can take a next step and be on a sales call and become a customer.
Absolutely. And as we said before, this is so applicable no matter what size of organization you're at. You know, the pain points are the same, even though they show up in different ways. But I just want to say that because it is important that we clarify the partnership that sales and marketing have to have, which is kind of a generic thing to say, I guess, probably as a whole, both parties, if you will, both silos would agree. But I always picture that emoji of the shaking hands. You know, you've got sales and marketing, and where they meet is, in my opinion, this juncture of the way that we use our words and the way that I love that inside around the website should be a sales. Should just sit in the sales house.
I was working with a company one time in the financial space, and they had an enormous email list. I mean, it was huge for what they did because their marketing team was incredible. I mean, they could generate leads like nobody I've ever seen, but the sales team was not busy. Like they were starving for leads. We start to kind of dive in a little bit as a software company. Turns out most of the leads or most of the people on the email list were end users of the product who had zero influence on the buying decision. So the marketing team, as great as they were great at targeting all the wrong people because they never paused to check with the sales team and say, is this the kind of content that is attracting the people that 100 people on the sales team are on the phone with every day, all day?
Interesting.
Had we had that conversation, we probably would have avoided so many sales challenges and we would have been able to get more of the right people in the game. I can think of another company last year I was with. Before I got there, the CMO sent me a several page document. It was bullet points, probably 3 or 4 pages of single space bullet points of who their target audience was. And it was like different industries, different positions in a company. I mean, it was a lot. It felt like I remember reading on the plane thinking, I'm just not sophisticated enough to understand this. So we get in the room, CEO, C-suite's there, head of marketing or head of sales, VP of sales, et cetera. So I started asking, I said, who buys from you? This B2B company. And the VP of sales has been in this company for 25 years. And he starts rattling off kind of the categories. And I said, okay, who do you like selling to the most anecdotally? And there was basically 3 audiences and he picked one. And I said, how much revenue do you think, if you had to guess, that you think you generate from that one audience? He said probably 80 to 85%. And then he said they're the easiest to sell to. They understand our value proposition the most and they buy the most often. And I looked at the CEO and the CMO and I said, why aren't we just talking to that audience?
Interesting.
And the CMO looked at me. His company's on track to do 17 million this year. And he said, we could probably clear the 17 million if we only sold one product category to that one audience. audience. And then I said, why are we trying to sell 48 product categories to 74 different audiences?
Yeah.
We're getting confused. At some point, we have to narrow in and say, we know what the sales team is responsible for delivering every day because they got to hit quota and their commissions and all that. There's a lot of accountability there. How do we come back and say, okay, what you learn on those calls every day, how can it move up into our marketing so that we're attracting more of the people that we know understand our value the best? They're going to buy the easiest, spend the most, and stay the longest.
It's too simple. It's so helpful. It is, because you can waste so much time and energy, and you think like, even it's interesting perspective that you took where you're like, okay, yeah, you think that maybe we need to communicate to all these audiences, but actually do you? If you can get more targeted, get more focused, it takes so much time and energy, even just to version out one email to all of these different audiences, right? Like just the segmenting, you can get so bombarded across the board, both the marketing teams and the sales teams. So the focus and the clarity, if anything, even for a season, let's just get laser focused and see what happens, experiment a little bit. Let that.
Yeah. One of the challenges too that comes up in companies, and some people hear what I say, or they read StoryBrand or hear and they go, oh, that's really simple. And that's the point.
Right.
The larger your organization gets, the higher up you get as a marketing executive, the more important it is in your job to keep things simple. Because as soon as you simplify something, within 60 seconds of people leaving that room, they will want to overcomplicate it. How many times have you been on LinkedIn and just tried to read a description of what somebody says they do, and you go, I know all those words in the English language, but when you put them in that order, I don't understand what that means.
Yes.
Because it becomes a giant game of corporate telephone, right? If you're an executive of a large company and you're, let's say, CMO at a large company, you've got senior VPs of marketing, you've got a VP of marketing, you've got senior directors, you've got managers, you've got individual contributors. There's a lot of layers between who's ever the executive at the top all the way to the front line. And it is a game of telephone.
Yeah.
And if it is not super simple and clear at the top, and they are banging that drum to keep it super simple and clear, it will get very confusing by the time it goes down to the tactics of a marketing email. Or some kind of automation or some kind of sales enablement collateral or whatever it is. So the executives, I think now more than ever in the crowded, noisy world we live in, have to fight to keep things really simple and clear and distill it down to the core of whatever it is. You could say, we solve this problem for people. That's it. I've seen I was with an organization last year that did $900 million in 2022, on track to clear $1 billion. I think they cleared $1 billion in 2023. And by the end of the day, their head of marketing looked at me and was like, I had no idea we could distill everything we do, almost 20,000 employees, $1 billion in revenue, down to one core problem. He said, I never would have figured that out. He said, but if we can distill down that core problem, now we can take it and extrapolate it across the organization.
Right.
But we've got to first look on, here's the core problem we solve. And I think if we want to see examples, I think you could look at a company like Nike and say, I think they're pretty clear on the problem they solve for people. They help people become better athletes, whether they are actual athletes or people like me who are not athletic, who just still like the Nike stuff, who may think I become like the people in the posters at the Nike store, versus some other athletic apparel brands who are all over the place. And you have no idea what problem they actually solve in the market, or who they're trying to help people become in the market.
And everyone thinks they're a unicorn, don't they? So when you walk into a room, it feels too simple, because I have experienced many rooms where it's like, yeah, well, but like everybody has their own explanation of why this won't work for them. And the point is, no matter the size, to your point, the clearer you have to get. What is the one thing? What is your one thing? Drill down. There is a one thing. And so our takeaway to you, whoever's listening, would be find that one thing, fight for clarity. When there's clarity, there's alignment that follows. And to your point, everyone leaves a room and overcomplicates things pretty much instantly. So as a leader, bringing the troops back to the one thing, fighting for that clarity is where you'll win and where ultimately the revenue growth comes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
You can even watch it down to some of the simplest Shark Tank. My 9-year-old has become a huge fan in the last several weeks. And watch what the sharks will ask the company. What problem do you solve? They literally will say, what problem do you solve? I don't understand it. Or if the person will say this, I think there's a huge market opportunity here. One example I love to talk about is Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. We're all familiar with that case. She raised $1 billion on a product that never existed. Right? We've all read the story, followed the trial, probably read the book, etc. But if you go back and watch, she was able to build that entire company and build that brand, raise $1 billion, get some incredible just stalwarts on the board. I think because she kept talking over and over and over again about a single problem. She didn't talk about all the crazy nuanced technology. She would just say, I think it should be possible to do any lab test from a tiny drop of blood from a finger. Everybody hears that and goes, yeah, I hate getting a physical. I would love to get one prick and get all this information at home and all this kind of stuff. We hear that problem and our brains go, that's one I want to solve. I would love to have that solved. Even on the documentaries that are out there, some very smart investors like, I wanted that to work so bad. Yes. Very smart people, when they were introduced with a problem, our brains are designed, when a problem is introduced, our brains are designed to lean in. Okay. And so if we can distill whatever we're doing down to a single problem we solve for the market or solve for our audience, it's going to cause people to draw in. And then we can take it and build everything out from there. Another example I look at is Marvel. I've lost track of all the Marvel stuff. It's so many things. But Marvel Phase 4, I think, starts with either the Spider-Man after Avengers Endgame or Black Widow, somewhere in there. But it goes for a couple of years, covers 7 or 8 movies, a bunch of TV shows, first season of Loki, WandaVision, Hawkeye, whatever. Those movies made almost $6 billion at the global box office and a bunch of hours of TV shows on Disney+. And all of those things between Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and I think the Eternals is in there, and I forget what else. Everything boils down to trying to solve the problem of defining one's identity. Now, if Marvel, generating billions of dollars from these films, can distill everything down to one core problem, I promise whatever brand thinks they're a unicorn can do the same thing. You can do the work to figure that and keep it really simple and focus on the one thing, which then allows you to go build everything out from there.
I'm writing a LinkedIn post in my head about what is my one thing, what do I sell? Yeah. Amazing. Well, before we go, I want to, I ask permission to ask this question because as I have followed your social media, as you've been honest about your journey in discovering adult ADHD diagnosis, which is an incredible journey. I have a loved family member that has been on a similar process. So as I see your posts, I'm relating it back to what he and I are collaborating on and learning, and super duper smart individual who has discovered he felt stuck in a lot of ways, that this diagnosis has gotten him unstuck. So would you share just with our audience, because I think this is an incredibly vulnerable and helpful topic to show up on. Tell me about how your professional journey has been impacted by your discovery of ADHD, and what you would say to someone watching who might feel like they are wrestling through some similar issues.
For me, it started late 2022. I ironically read something on what was then, I think it was still called Twitter. I forget when it changed officially, but I started seeing stuff in my feed and I was like, that sounds like me. And it was all ADHD symptoms. And of course, like most people, I just assumed ADHD was primarily the kid bouncing off the walls, in 3rd grade. And so I started reading about it, read a little bit online. I went to Dr. Google, like it was we shouldn't do.
We should not.
But then I just happened to have my physical that time of year. So I asked my physician, I said, hey, tell me about this. He's like, well, we actually have to refer you to a specialist to go through that. I said, okay. So I went to the specialist, did all the paperwork, did all the things, and it all led to, you have ADHD. I never had the version that was like the super hyperactive kid.
Right.
I'm always tapping my leg, whatever. I just figured it's because I played drums for 25 years. That's a symptom I've learned of ADHD. So for me, it's, when you're in the kind of work that we're in, which is really knowledge work, and it's so many people now, so many marketing executives are in the professional knowledge work space. We're not creating things. We're not making coffee. We're not building buildings. We're putting words on the internet primarily is what most of our job is. When you're in the knowledge work space, one of the greatest things you can do is figure it out yourself and kind of figure out your own thing. So for me, it's been a matter of learning what ADHD makes me really good at, but then also trying to figure out how do I mitigate the downsides. And then along the way, just figuring out what do I need to create in and around my own little world to help me shine a light on what I'm really good at and focus more of my efforts there. And the things where ADHD is something that it may cause me to be poor on or just kind of substandard at work or below average on. What can I build around that to mitigate it? So those are some of the biggest things for me in my work, is also helping clarify, okay, for me in my business, because I primarily I work one-on-one with companies and essentially in a consulting space. How can I even design my own work and my business around my strengths so that I can leverage that and continue to grow and scale my own work?
Thank you for sharing that. What tools or resources have been helpful to you that we could pass along to somebody who's watching and is thinking through some of this too?
Yeah, I read the book, I don't have it on my desk. Fast Minds was a super helpful book by 2 doctors who have treated thousands of adult ADHD patients. And so there's a bunch of things in there explaining about what it is and what it's not. And then also some great tools in there to help you think through some habits and things like that. That was a great resource. Honestly, just talking to your doctor, quite honestly. Like if you're feeling, you can Google around and see there's a bunch of different symptoms out there.
Yeah.
That'll can lead to it. And I don't want to go into all those, but talking to your doctor, that book Fast Minds was really interesting and really helpful. I think those are probably the main two things. Yeah.
That's a great title. Speaking of naming, putting words on the internet, Fast Minds, that is, because that's like a comment that just summarizes a lot, doesn't it, about that experience?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Wes. This is huge and so helpful to people on both sides of the fence, if you will. But we're trying to bring those two hands together with that emoji of sales and marketing. So that's why this is called Sales Meet Marketing. But thanks for being with us, for sharing your wisdom. And if anybody wants to connect with you, LinkedIn is the best place. We'll have that in the description of the YouTube show and podcast. But thanks.
Yeah, you follow me on LinkedIn. I'd forget the URL there, also on Instagram. Also, I want to throw this out real quick. I think one of the reasons sales and marketing folks struggle is because they really haven't spent the time to really nail down who they're actually trying to talk to, or who they need to be reaching. They invest all these things in ideal client profiles, and it really becomes like an ideal client pulse. Like if they have a pulse, they're our ideal client. So I have a process called Ideal Client Story, which helps you figure out exactly who you're trying to talk to for sales and marketing. You can go to wesgay.com/ideal client and download that free resource. It's a worksheet. You can take your team through it and help you figure out, okay, who do we actually need to be talking to help us get more leads in the door to get more customers.
Incredible. Well, thanks. And we'll see you next time.